Hi, I'm Angie Cruz, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the mental health of children and adolescents. Since we all work with youth, this is going to be focused solely on the youth that we work with, the needs, what we can offer them, and hopefully some practical skills that you all can use when you're interacting with youth and making sure that you are a guide to help them and support them in their mental health journeys. So I am from Emory University. My research is focused on mental health, and I hope that I can share some of the knowledge that I've gained over the years in my work, in my schooling, and in my training that can hopefully benefit everyone here. So we're going to start with important things to know. So big overarching topics that I'm hoping to touch today. Mental health is a broad topic. It encompasses so many different things that I will touch in a little bit, but it makes it difficult for it to be completely covered in one session. So I hope that this is a starting off point for all of you to continue your education and hopefully keep moving so that you can support the youth that you work with as best as possible. Youth specifically are particularly vulnerable. So I will be going over a few of the vulnerabilities that youth and certain subgroups of youth have to deal with. And I will come back to this in just a moment. And finally, we're going to talk about short-term versus long-term solutions. Mental health, like I said, is a broad topic. So that means that some of the issues that youth are going to need to deal with involve smaller short-term solutions, and some of them take a really long time to solve. And I'm going to walk you through a few of those things today. To start, mental health is a broad topic. So this is a list of all the many focuses that could be held when discussing mental health, when focusing on it as a career. For me, I tend to work in some of these and some of them, but in an overlapping nature. There's a little bit of a variety there. So mental health can include the following: diagnoses, which means actually taking diagnostic tests and analyzing what type of mental health issues certain youth might have. Treatment plans, which is after that. Once we know what they have, how can we help them? What do they need in order to heal, in order to cope in whatever ways they need? Met or unmet needs. A lot of what we talk about in mental health actually doesn't have to deal with what is actually going on in the brain, but rather what is going on in our environment. And that is going to determine in large part how our mental health issues affect us and how they turn into action, into behaviors. Policy and legislation. Similarly, it is difficult for young people to get access to care, to try to work on their mental well-being if they don't have access to health insurance, if they are not eligible for certain types of care. There's a huge variety of issues that can stop there. Insurance and access goes hand in hand with that, as well as disability rates. We have to think of all of these in a very broad term. As I mentioned, each of these could be an entire career. And I know many people who have actually engaged in each of these as careers. So we're obviously not going to be able to cover it all in one session, but I hope that this can inspire you to go into some of these topics more deeply, so that you can determine what you think is most important for your situation, for your clubs, for your organization as a whole, and the youth that you serve. Aging and cognitive decline. This is something we usually talk about with elders. So why am I bringing it up in youth? It's because we don't know if some of our youth might be dealing with elders as guardians. And that can be a huge problem for some of them. So that is something that is actually very relevant. Then we think about neurology and neuropathology. A lot of that has to deal with the way that our brain interacts with the rest of our bodies. So while some youth might deal with mental health issues that we typically think of as far as anxiety, depression, the reality is that others may have rather neurological issues that do tie into their mental health and can make their mental health worse, but also involve their bodies and the ways that they are biologically predetermined to have some of these issues. Like I said, I won't be covering all of these things today. These are just broad topics, or rather subtopics of the broad topic that is mental health. And safety and suicidality. This is actually something that we will be focusing on today, because I think for the age groups that we serve, safety, suicidality are two of the biggest issues that we might face in our current day, and with youth within the age groups that typically attend clubs. So that actually leads me very well into youth mental health statistics. So the reality is that we are dealing with a very vulnerable group. This group of people tend to struggle in different ways. So some key statistics that I think you all need to know: globally, 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds experience a mental health disorder. This is so important. That means that no matter what country you focus on, no matter what region you're in, you're probably going to engage with children, with youth, with young people who desperately need mental health care. The gravity of these diagnoses is going to vary, obviously. Some people may need extremely urgent care, and others may need, just someone to talk to every once in a while. That is going to vary, but it is clearly something that is applicable to all of us. And there's no exception to that. These are global statistics that you can find on the World Health Organization website. They have statistics for you. There are also a lot of research articles that focus on this. And at the end of this slide deck, you will see some links for ways that you can keep some of these practical skills with you at all times, so that you're ready when young people might need your help. And then engagement with care. So this is actually true across the board, no matter the age group. Majority of people with mental health issues do not actually seek treatment. In the previous couple slides, I discussed a little bit of why that may be. There are a lot of barriers to this care. Some of those things we can have an immediate impact on, things like having someone to talk to, things like transportation to these locations. But then there are so many things that we do not have immediate control over, things like policy barriers, insurance status, or just finances as a whole. Those two things are very, very important, because whether someone has a mental health concern or not is not going to necessarily help them by itself. That knowledge is part of the steps that need to be taken. The other part is actually trying to seek treatment. So we're going to focus on what we can control, and hopefully learn the language needed to actually discuss what we can't control and how we can make changes as a community, as a whole group of people that want to advocate for improvement in some of these barriers. So disparities in mental health, this is actually exactly the work I do. I put big bullet points because, like I said, this is a huge topic. I am completely focused on it in my PhD now. So this is not something that we're going to be able to cover quickly, but I want you all to start thinking about it and to start thinking about some of this terminology. Disparities basically means that some groups are having to deal with certain concerns more strongly and with more prevalence than other groups. In our case, youth are a part of a group that is disproportionately impacted by mental health concerns. Youth have some of the highest rates of suicidality, depression, anxiety. And so the youth in and of itself is a very needy, for lack of a better term, they are a population in need. And I hope that everyone can gain something from this, so that we can help that population moving forward. So shifting to some of the vulnerable groups that I have here. So vulnerable groups can be determined by, like I said, age, but also by income. People who come from low income backgrounds, they are going to be more likely to struggle with seeking care for many reasons that I have already mentioned. Geography is a huge deal, especially depending on what part of the world you're currently in. For some, it is just an issue of getting to the care that they need. There is literally no way to access physically some of these issues. And that's where things like telehealth come in and virtual care. However, that is not necessarily popular everywhere yet. So that is just something to think about and possibly something to advocate for. Discrimination is a big part of the work that I do. Racial disparities, so disparities between different racial groups, is going to depend on the country. I do my work in the United States, and part of that means that race is a huge determinant in people being able to access healthcare and to feel a certain level of comfort with the mental health care system. That being said, this may differ in other areas. In other areas, discrimination could be a result of gender. It could be a result of religion. It could be a result of geography or of income. There are many forms of discrimination, but all of these can actually very much impact certain groups and make them even more vulnerable and more likely to be harmed by mental health concerns. Some major concerns that I think this particular population needs to consider and needs to be considered when interacting with youth. Suicidality. Suicidality is a huge concern when it comes to youth, especially youth that may not always be with adults that can take care of them and that can engage in discussions with them. And growing up is a very difficult experience. There are a lot of fast, stressful changes happening as we grow up, and part of that can lead to just an overwhelming feeling of bad emotions that can result in the worst possible outcome. This is something that we as adults, as guides, as mentors, need to be very, very aware of. And I will go into how to deal with a child or an adolescent who is considering suicide, and hopefully we can start to get that training so that we become more comfortable in how to solve that problem. Inability to complete daily tasks. There are different forms of depression, anxiety, bipolarity, and a lot of other diagnoses that result in young people not being able to complete just the regular tasks, whether that be waking up to go to school or making themselves food or finding food. This can actually be a huge, huge detriment in many areas around the world. Because for some families, youth also engage in gathering resources for the family. So whether that be selling things to make money or having jobs of their own, this can be a huge detriment to them and to their families. So it is a very difficult situation that we might find the youth that we work with in. So we need to work on how to minimize some of those effects. And generational trauma. There is a very common phrase that says, hurt people hurt people. And it basically insinuates that people who are not healed, people who have not coped with the problems that they have faced in their youth and in their adulthood may pass on some of those negative feelings and negative behaviors to their children. And the cycle will continue unless we're able to put a stop to it. Part of that probably means adjusting our society, adjusting the way we see gender differences, right? Adjusting the way we might see seeking care. A lot of stigma might be attached to mental health. So there are a lot of things that we can play a role in and try to also minimize the effects of some of that previously had trauma. Solutions. So solutions is, again, I'm going to repeat this so many times, is a huge topic, and it's very difficult to cover everything. So we're going to start with a basic distinction. I'm actually going to move myself a little bit so you can see my slide entirely. Short-term versus long-term solutions. Sometimes we are under the impression that short-term solutions and long-term solutions overlap a lot, and maybe in some ways they do, but not always. And so short-term solutions that I focus on and that I will hopefully start your journey on learning and practicing includes crisis management. Crisis management is a very big deal, and just because it's short-term does not mean it is not significant. It is necessary. Crisis management is usually trying to bring down the level of stress, of honestly just general pain, so that the person at hand does not commit suicide. This is a huge deal, because if we can just prolong these decisions, these really big, hard decisions, then maybe we can start offering some space for healing. This is a huge deal, and this is an entire training in and of itself. So I'm going to give the basics, and I hope that this kind of kickstarts some trainings within each of your organizations, because this is ongoing. Emergency services. Emergency services are going to change depending on what part of the world you are in. This means that you are, as someone who is working with youth, are going to need to know where the closest hospital is, how to get to the hospital, and what number to call when you know that someone might be at physical or mental risk. These are all very important things. Distractions. Sometimes, this is not all the time, but sometimes youth or whoever is having some kind of mental health concern might just need to shift their minds to something else. For some people, that can be, watching a TV show that they think is entertaining, listening to music, reading a book, going out at play. All of those things could be just distractions that help for a minute, but again, short-term solutions. Self-care kind of goes hand in hand. We often think of self-care as the ultimate solution to mental health concerns, and that is just not the case, but it is helpful in some situations. Things like getting a massage or taking a bath, or some of these other things that we think of. Sometimes it is the basics. Are we eating meals correctly? Are we sleeping the appropriate amount of hours? Are we just doing what we need to do to survive, to take care of ourselves? So for us, for some of us, that might be a very difficult thing to engage in. And for others, that might be a very easy and exciting thing to engage in. And it really just depends on the person. And again, knowing that this is only part of the solutions that we should be considering. Long-term is where a big part of the solutions lie, but it is also some of the hardest things to change for a person and their situation. That doesn't mean we can't try, and that doesn't mean that we can't work on some of these things. Long-term solutions can include things like therapy access. That is some of the work that my research is in. How often do young people with mental health concerns actually seek out help from a therapist, from a psychiatrist, etc.? Financial support. Sometimes it's as simple as needing money. It is hard to think about mental health when you need to put food on the table. And this is something that I'm sure many people who are watching this video are very aware of. The issues that some of our youth go through are very sometimes practical issues. They are things like, I don't have food today. And obviously that is going to harm someone's mental health. That being said, those are also things that we don't always have a lot of control over. So it's important that we consider those things when we're trying to solve some of these issues. They're not always easy to solve. And as long as we are moving in the right direction and working on them, it's a start. It's better than nothing. And that kind of goes into the next one, which is decreasing stigma. Stigma is the fear, anxiety, the distancing from a certain topic because we are ashamed of it. mental health has become more and more of a conversation, and stigma is still a huge reason why people do not talk about their mental health. We're scared. We think that to talk about it is to make it worse, and that's just not the case. So as adults who work with youth, we have to start decreasing that stigma. We have to make sure that youth know it is okay to have strong emotions. It is okay to talk about those strong emotions. And most importantly, it is okay to get help. And that's something that we can all continuously push forward. And then finally, policy change. Policy change kind of encompasses all of these things. Encompasses, my apologies, kind of encompasses all of these things, that they all need to be adjusted in some way so that people can have easier access to care. And sometimes that means laws just need to change. Healthcare needs to change. Again, not something we can just solve really quickly or with a big discussion or even with a presentation, but it's something that if we start educating ourselves on what needs to change, maybe we can start working on advocating so that we can change those things as we go and as we try to help youth. That brings me into crisis management. This is probably going to be the most practical part of this presentation for you all. And I hope that this is the kind of piece of learning that you can pass on to everyone in your organization and anyone who might need it. I am very passionate about this specifically because I have been a crisis counselor for many years, and I focus on helping people through suicidal thoughts and many difficult things of that nature. I hope this next section is especially helpful for many of you. And as always, I am open to try to help through some of these learning processes, and I will give my contact information at the end of the presentation. So this is something that many of you might not have heard of, and hopefully many of you have, asking the questions. So the first part of trying to handle a crisis situation when someone is considering suicide is you have to actually ask. So one thought that a lot of people have that is inaccurate is that asking if someone is suicidal might give them the idea that they should be suicidal. And that is not accurate. Research has time and time again proven that asking the question does not start the thoughts. On the contrary, it actually helps many times. So asking someone who you feel is in emotional distress, are you currently considering suicide? You have to ask directly. It is not an easy question to ask, and it is not an easy question to answer. You have to go into this knowing that this is going to be a very long and difficult conversation, but at the end, it's going to be worth it because it could save someone's life. If someone is considering suicide, asking them, do you know how you would end your life? Right at this moment, do you have some way of doing that that you plan on using? For some people, taking that source of danger away could honestly stop them from ever attempting suicide again. That's a big deal. There's a lot of research to back this up. And for anyone who appreciates reading scientific papers, I am always happy to share my resources. And then if yes, when do you plan on doing this? Knowing a time marker is a big deal, because if you know that it is going to happen within the next 24 hours, that means this person needs to get care immediately. There is no time for pause. There's no time for waiting and seeing how it happens. No, we need to get this person to care immediately. And this is very important because when we work with youth, we may not be with them all the time. And if we're not with them, we have no idea whether or not they're in a safe space. And that is impossible to gauge, which means that they need to go to medical services immediately. The biggest thing that I want people to try to focus on when they are engaging in these conversations is listening without judgment. This is hard because sometimes our instinct is to say, but you have a good life, or, but you're fine, you should be happy. That is judgment. And we don't want to put our own perspectives on people who are really struggling. We have to be a listening ear. And sometimes that means staying quiet. Sometimes practicing silence so that someone can get something heavy off of their chest is the best thing we can do for them. That is going to move me a little bit. Sorry, I'm going to continue moving myself around so that you can see everything, but seeking help. So keeping emergency services information nearby is a necessary thing. If you can, make sure you are keeping emergency numbers fully visible, available for anyone to access. This is very important because when the moment is very serious, dire, and an emergency, you don't want to have to be looking for this information. You want to have it ready just in case. The next part of that is de-escalation. So once you know, okay, this person at this immediate moment is safe, but these thoughts are still weighing heavily on their minds. So focus on listening more than speaking, and then find ways to bring this person to a calm level. The main goal is stopping them from hurting themselves for the time being. You keep going as you continue interacting with them, but you have to make sure first that they are alive and that they are healthy and that they are cared for as long as they can possibly get help. Part of this that I think is very important, and I have it in red here, do not leave this person alone until you are sure that they are safe. And sometimes, most of the time, that means getting a full evaluation from a trained professional. This is hard. Like I said, we all have many things going on in our lives, and we are not always with the youth that we work with, but their life is the most important thing. And I cannot express that enough. You have to make sure that you are able to get them to what they need at that moment. And then follow up. Follow up is arguably just as important as this conversation in the emergency moment. Following up with a person about suicidality and their thoughts, connecting them to resources. This is obviously a situation that is going to require healing, and healing takes time, and healing takes help. So please remember this as you're going into these conversations. I hope you can hold this video or these images somewhere where it's accessible for your clubs, and that way you will be ready if there's ever an emergency situation that you have to take care of. And then I continue with one piece that I think people often forget: following up with yourself. Your health is extremely important as well. And this is a very difficult conversation. That means you need to make sure that you are okay as well. So engage in check-ins with yourself about your well-being. Connect yourself with ongoing resources so that you can process and heal from the situation. Witnessing self-harm or an attempted suicide is possibly very traumatic. And for some people, it can stick with them and really harm their own mental well-being. So you are going to need ways and time to cope. Make sure you're keeping this in mind. The only way that you can help the youth in your life is by also being okay yourself. So to conclude, I want us all to think about how our roles allow us the honor, and I do use this term very, very intentionally. It is an honor that we will often be the first ones that youth will confide in. Because of the work that we do, because of the ways that we interact with youth, we are going to be some of their most trusted sources of help. And that means that we need to treat it like the honor that it is, and we owe it to them to be as prepared as possible to support them. Trainings should not be a one-time thing. It should not be a one-time occurrence, and effort has to go into learning. We have to continuously be willing to learn new ways to support, new forms of long-term help, new forms of care and treatment. And part of that means having these conversations with your teams, continuously having these conversations with yourself and with people who can actually provide a lot of these resources. So I want to finish just by thanking you all for what you do. You are an essential part in the mental well-being of the youth in our lives, of the youth in our world. And without you, a lot of these youth may be at much higher risk. I want to make sure that everyone has a moment to jot down my information should you want any information about the presentation that I just gave you, as well as additional trainings and other work. You can contact me at my email, which is listed on this slide. And I do also want to give you these 3 resources. So these 3 links are extremely helpful, practical. They function as obviously short-term solutions, but some long-term solutions are also on here. The National Institute of Mental Health and the National Alliance on Mental Illness are both United States-based organizations. However, they do have a lot of the steps that I mentioned here for crisis management. They have resources for ongoing trainings, and they also have very practical skills that you can learn for different kinds of mental health concerns. Checkpoint Global is probably going to be one of the best resources for everyone who is watching this. This is going to allow you to select your home country and see a list of resources that might be helpful for you regarding mental health. That includes emergency numbers, that includes local clinics, that includes many other resources. And so I hope that everyone can utilize this and hopefully continue learning and helping the youth and honestly everyone in your lives. Thank you so much for listening.